Hey, welcome back to another episode of the She's Making an Impact podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Ngom. I have a treat for you today. I have brought in Colin Boyd for the second time because he's good. I'm like, we could spend another 3 hours together. Colin is amazing. If you don't know him, he helps experts, course creators, and coaches to speak confidently and to sell on stage without coming across pushy or salesy. He's brilliant. He talks about how he did a webinar with no sales to then a six-figure webinar in an hour. Is pretty wild. I actually hired him to help me with the presentation. I was asked to speak at Chalene Johnson's event, Marketing Impact Academy. So I hired him to help me with my presentation. You don't necessarily have to hire him, but he's actually doing a free training series that we talk about in our conversation that I highly suggest you go sign up for, because this one skill is so important. So I'll tell you the link now, and I highly suggest you go now before we actually start talking. RachelandGom.com/training series. So I try to make it super easy. RachelandGom.com/training series. Go register. Colin's just brilliant at what he does and you need it. So go, and let's dive into our conversation. Hey, Colin, welcome back to the show. How are you?
I'm amazing. How are you, Rachel?
I am so good. And I'm so happy you're back because I loved our conversation the first time. So if all of our listeners, go back, listen to episode 314, where we had you on talking about an irresistible offer. And today I'm like, we got to talk about the webinar and how to create a profitable webinar. As you were like helping me put together my webinar and my presentation, like you're brilliant at what you do. So I'm really happy we get to have this conversation. So tell us quickly a little bit about you and then we'll dive in.
Well, I know for me, when I first started my expert business, I heard about this idea of webinars and it just made me like so excited. I put together a webinar presentation and did it like, the virtual presentation that everyone was telling me to do. And I actually ended up having 600 people sign up to it.
Wow.
I was pumped. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And this is back in the day when Facebook allowed you to like DM people an unlimited amount of people,
The
right?
good old days.
The
Oh,
good
man.
old day, right? It was the wild west of Facebook. Okay. So I'm hustling. I'm getting as many people as I can on it. 600 people sign up to it. I'm like so excited. And I do the presentation and then I open the cart and no one buys. Like absolutely no one buys. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, maybe tomorrow they're going to buy. And that was because I had a 4-day open cart. And then the next day they didn't buy it. And then the third day they didn't buy it. And then I'm like, okay, the fourth day guaranteed, like people, it's going to be a flood. Definitely. Zero. No one buys until the last 4 hours. Someone bought the lowest payment plan on my program and I was devastated.
I love that you tell that story. I actually told a story on the podcast yesterday of how I did a webinar and nobody bought. And I like retreated to my bed and just binge watched TV the rest of the day. It's like you have that little pity party of like, what happened?
No, literally. Exactly. I was absolutely devastated. And I'm like, now, yes, I was grateful for the one person, but to be honest, I'd lost money in the promotion because I'd spent like $5,000 to create the actual course and everything. Because I didn't know about a beta offer. That was back in the day, which is kind of what we teach now. But like this idea of I created everything and no one bought. But then what happened was I just got obsessed because I knew that there was a difference. I knew that there was a way that I could present where people enjoyed the presentation and they actually bought the program as well. Because I knew the program could help them. And so this one program, which I don't sell anymore, by the way, I used to teach productivity like 8 years ago. This was about 7, 8 years ago.
Yeah.
And it was a productivity program. And what happened was I just got obsessed about how do I present this in a way that's valuable, but also lead to clients. And so went on a whole journey. This is when I was living in Australia. So we now live in the US in Newport Beach in California. And I got obsessed about it. And then I learned how to speak in a way that generated demand. And what happened was I remember doing my first $10,000 webinar. This was about 3 or 4 months later. I did a $10,000 webinar and I was like, oh my gosh, I just made 10 G's in 1 hour. Like it was absolutely insane. And then we worked on it. We worked on scaling strategies. And then I remember doing my first $100,000 webinar and doing $100,000 in 1 hour. And I just thought, oh my gosh, like this is, I remember when I left my corporate job, I was getting paid, I think it was about $45,000 when I left my corporate job, right? And so I got paid double my entire year's salary in 1 hour. And then that was when I was like, what the heck is this thing?
Yep.
And so that's for me what got me obsessed. And what's cool, that one program that I couldn't sell, or one person bought out of 600, was the same program that I did $100,000 an hour on.
Okay, I love that you said that, because a lot of times people think it's the program that's the problem.
I didn't change anything about the program. Like,
so what'd you change?
The course was totally the same. Two things. I changed how I presented the value of the program. And then I changed the offer itself, which is what we talked about on the last podcast.
Yeah.
So I changed the offer, the structure of the offer and how it was presented. I put in some bonuses and things like that. But the biggest thing I changed was how I actually presented on the webinars. And I stopped over teaching, which is a big problem that people have. I stopped over teaching and overwhelming the audience. And I actually created content that created demand, which we can chat about today. And so that's what's cool. That's what's hopeful for all your listeners, is like, I bet that your program is amazing. Like, you don't need to change your program. You need to change how you present your program, so that it actually sells.
Okay. So what are some of the changes you made in that presentation that led to $100,000 in an hour? Because I think everyone's hand is raised of, I want that, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a few things. Well, first of all, I started to feel really comfortable selling, because at the start, I was really uncomfortable making an offer. And so I think right from the outset, there is a mindset shift that needs to happen, which is that people have to realize that if you don't make an offer to your audience, you can't serve them on the highest level. So in other words, if you don't make an offer to your audience, you're actually ripping off your audience. Not everyone, but the right people for your offer. If they join your offer, that offer can completely change their life. It's like your offers, Rachel. Like, you've got incredible programs. And, if you don't make offers, if I don't make offers, if your listeners don't make offers to your audience, to their audience, there are people in that audience whose lives will be completely changed if they join their program. I know this happened for you. I messaged one of my mentors 2 days ago. I said, hey, dude, I just want to let you know, I would not be living in America and I would not have our program, Sell from Stage Academy, if it wasn't for you. And I just wanted to say thanks. Hand on heart, like, genuinely wouldn't be living the life we're living. And that's the mindset shift that I think people need to make. They need to stop thinking that when I sell, I'm trying to take money from people. No, you're opening up a space where people who are committed can enter and see a transformation in a faster, more easily way than they could have ever seen in their life by themselves.
Totally. I think that's such a great mindset shift to have for people that are like, I don't want to sell, or selling feels icky. It's like, you can't help people if they're not invested. Exactly.
So that's the first shift. That's the first shift they need to make.
Okay. Talk about how you were over teaching, because I know you mentioned that about my presentation. So I think this is something a lot of us, like, if someone's going to come to a webinar, we want to make sure we're not like blowing smoke up their bums, right? Like, we want to actually help people. So, like, what's the balance of how do we teach or help without over teaching, which then ruins conversions?
Well, so one of the biggest mistakes that people make is that they overteach, which is what you brought up.
Yes.
And the mistake that people make is that they think that if they can present content that is so helpful for people, that the audience will go, wow, I got this for free. Imagine if I give the person money, what I'm going to get, right? That used to be a kind of a saying that people used to say a lot. The problem with that is what will happen is that the audience will give you some really nice feedback. They'll say, oh my gosh, that's amazing. When you get to the offer, first of all, they'll go like, hang on, how come you're making an offer? Like, I thought this was like a how-to training, right? So, because there's a totally different energy when you move into the offer. Secondly, the people that would have bought will say, hang on, can I just get these 19 things that you've given me to do done first? And then when I get that done, then I'll look at your offer. Have you ever had any of your clients or anyone say that?
I remember I did a challenge one time and I was like, this is the best challenge ever. I'm gonna help so many people. And it was like ridiculous. They had like an hour of homework each day and they were just in like do mode.
Yeah.
And I mean, we converted okay, but we could have done so much better if I would have implemented what you teach.
Yeah. So it's like, so this is the biggest thing. Have you ever had your brain picked before, Rachel? You know, when people go, can I pick your brain? I
Of
bet you
course.
have.
Yes.
Right? As soon as you start to get good at anything, people will be like, oh my gosh, can I pick your brain? I know for me, I've had my brain picked many times. And what will happen is a lot of the time, this is what I used to do because I had, you know, like you and I, we've got this heart. We want to help people. I genuinely got into this business because I want to help people and I also want to make money and create a life that is worthwhile living, right? And so what would happen is people would DM me and they'll be like, hey, can I pick your brain? And I'll be like, cool. Like I'll jump on a call and I would literally open up the fire hose on them. So in other words, like give them absolutely everything that they need to do, all the how-to, all the practicals. Then I'd catch up with them maybe, I don't know, a month later, 2 months later. And I'd go, oh, how'd you go with everything we talked about? Because I like gave you everything. And they're like, oh, you know, like I just haven't got around to doing anything. Yeah, I've been thinking about it, definitely. And then I see them like a year later and they've done nothing. And what would have been more valuable was actually spending some time working out why this decision for them is not just important, but also urgent and necessary right now. So when you make a decision, that is when you see change in your life, not when you have more practical how to.
Yeah.
And so what your audience is doing is they think they need to pick your brain on the webinar. So they come in and they're like, I want to learn how to do this, which like they genuinely do. The problem is that they think they're ready to learn how to do it, but they're not. The reason why they're not is because they're not motivated enough. In fact, for a lot of them, they would already be doing it if they were motivated enough. And so they think they need the how-to, but what they actually need is that they need to remove the resistance that is stopping them to commit to the process. That's the first thing they need to do. The second thing is they need to amplify the desire and create a sense of urgency around it. And then the final thing is they actually need to understand the roadmap and how to get there. But what most people do is they think on their webinar, I need to just teach the roadmap and some of the ideas, and that will be enough for the audience to want to work with me because they'll see that I know what I'm talking about.
Right.
But that's only like 1/3 of the process.
Okay. So what are those elements of that profitable webinar? Like how many are there? How does it flow? What do we need to do if we're not over teaching?
Yeah. So the Sell from Stage formula that I teach, and this can be used on a webinar. Obviously, we're talking about webinars on a virtual stage, on a live stage. It doesn't matter, any sort of presentation. There's kind of like 3 core elements to any presentation. There is the introduction, there is the content, and there is the close. And I teach 3 structures. So the first structure is what's called a sharp sell. A sharp sell is where you make a direct offer. So that's maybe you've got a 997 online course or you've got a coaching program. So you make a direct offer on the presentation. The one that we were working on where you're going to sell from stage, that's a sharp sell, right? It's a direct offer, like getting people to take action right now. The second one is what I call a soft sell. And a soft sell is where you do a presentation in maybe a coaching group or someone's conference, and you get a download like a PDF or some sort of like a lead magnet, or you get people to fill out an application or you book a call. That's a soft sell. It's like, let's just take the next step. And then the final one is a no sell, which is a classic keynote where you ask for claps that leads to clients as opposed to getting their information. So a sharp sell gives you credit cards. Soft sell gives you clients' details, and then the no sell gives you claps that leads to clients.
Could you combine the two? This is something I didn't ask you when we were talking. Because I was thinking, could I have like a workbook with my presentation at the beginning where I'm able to capture their email address and then do the sharp sell at the end?
Yeah, 100% you could. Well, what tends to happen is when you design it right, they're actually one presentation. It's one presentation. The main difference is the end, is like what you move them to. And so like some little nuances around like what you're leading them to download or whatever. But 100%, like if you've got a no sell, and you want to still get their information. I mean, to me, that kind of turns into a soft sell because you're still getting their information.
Right.
So a no sell is a classic keynote where you're usually paid to keynote.
Yeah.
If you're doing a no sell, but the goal is for people to come up to you at the end and go like, oh my gosh, how do I work with you?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's when we get into what I call infusion selling. But if we look at the structure, there's 3 parts to any presentation. There's the intro, the content, and the close. And the first introduction, the goal is to touch people's hearts.
Mm-hmm.
To touch people's hearts. And how you do that is, first of all, you want to share a story, or you want to share some content that first of all shows the audience that you are like them and you get them.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, you show the audience that I'm just like you. I've been through the challenges you've been through, and I totally understand you. The second part is you want to share something that where the audience goes, not only do you understand me, but you can also lead me.
Mm-hmm.
And so there needs to be elements where people look at what you've done and what you can do, and they go, wow, this person is someone that I could follow.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third element is to answer the question of, and is there a path that I can follow to achieve what I want to achieve? And so that is what I call the core premise. And so that's the core idea that leads to that path. Now, that's the introduction. The content is about shifting their minds and equipping their hands. And if you're doing a sharp sell or any sort of presentation that sells, you want to not do too much hands. So not too much handsies, right? So you want to reduce the hands and increase the shifting of minds. And so what most people do is they educate the mind rather than shift the mind. And so the goal in a presentation that sells is to look at what are the mindset shifts that an audience needs to make in order to have desire for the outcome and to have reduced resistance that would stop them to committing to that. And
can you give an example of what that could look like?
Yeah. So I'll give an example. So for me, our program, Sell from Stage Academy, the core element of it is selling on stage, selling on any stage. So if someone feels uncomfortable selling, they won't want to join the program because they're like, I don't want to learn how to sell. So for me, I have to work on the idea that selling is not a sleazy thing. In fact, selling is actually the pathway to serving your audience on the highest level, which is what we started to do at the start of this podcast, right?
Yeah.
This is a little bit meta, by the way. A lot of the time when I teach, it's a little bit meta because it's like I'm doing and teaching at the same time. So the shift that my audience needs to make is they have to feel comfortable selling, or at least comfortable with the idea that that's a thing that is of benefit to me and my audience and the greater good.
Mm-hmm.
So the example here is you need to think about, your audience needs to think about, what are the resistance points that my audience would have around my offer or around what I can help them with? And then how do I frame their thinking so that when I present my offer, that's not going to be a resistance for them. Mm-hmm. Right. Another example could even just be, like a more generalized one. It could be that in life, you either get reasons or you get results. And so I know that that's not relevant for like a specific angle, but that idea of where people come up with all these reasons for why they can't do something or they get results, if you shift that thinking pattern, that's going to enable an audience member to feel more empowered to say yes to your program, because they're going to realize, oh my gosh, I'm stuck in my reasons. Am I going to live in my reasons, or am I going to step up into my results? And you get results with the program, or you get reasons in your old past story. And so like that's another example. But what you'll notice is that type of content is not necessarily in your course.
Right.
And so the mistake people make is they go to their course for their content, as opposed to going to the offer and asking, what are the resistances and what are the desires that the audience has that I need to show in my presentation for them to say yes to the offer?
Got it.
Does that make sense? So people start with their content in their course as opposed to the offer itself.
Okay.
And the presentation has to be built around the offer. So that is the shifting of minds. The equipping of hands is like you could have a little bit of how-to. For me, one of the things that we teach is that as soon as I call it the lose the sale line. So the lose the sale line is where once you get into too many steps, you've lost the sale.
How many is too many?
Like for me, I would say in an entire presentation, you want to give like one core step for people,
Okay.
maybe two. And so if you get into too many processes and steps, first of all, the audience gets overwhelmed, and they get confused. But secondly, it's going to move them into a place of where they'll feel like they need to do all these things before they can commit to that thing they really want to commit to. And then the final piece is moving their feet, which is the close. And there's three types, which is the sharp sell, soft sell, no sell. So yeah, it can be a direct offer, it can be an opt-in, or it can just be a standing ovation.
Okay. So let's say we want to make the offer. How do you transition from the teaching content portion of the webinar to the selling part of the webinar?
Yeah. Well, first of all, one way that I really like to do it is just to really like summarize what was most valuable, because one of the reasons why people don't feel like a presentation is valuable is because you as the presenter haven't asked them what was most valuable. And so if you ask in a way that has a presupposition or a linguistic assumption that something was valuable, you just ask what was most valuable. And so people will type in, oh my gosh, I love this idea. I love this idea. I love this idea. Because one of the big shifts is that you have to make as a speaker, if you want to grow your business, is that you can't see value as just how to. Because value can also be mindset shifts, belief shifts, identification of mistakes, just a sense of them feeling understood. Like all of that is value. It's not just how to. And so first of all, like I usually go like, what was most valuable? Then you usually got to revisit some sort of problems. Like you've got to bring up the problems that people are like concerned about. Then I use a process which I call like future pacing. And so like future pacing or projecting their future self is you actually take them into a future where they haven't created that yet. And it's a picture of who they want to be. And if you can get them to satiate and saturate in this sense of that's who I want to be, then that's going to move them to a more empowered place to make a decision of whether this program is the next step for them. And so the reason why people haven't got results is because they're stuck in their past self. And so one of the purposes of a transition is to really get them out of their past self and into their future self. And so some sort of projection of future self identity where you get them saturated and satiated in that space is really helpful. And then you can literally just move into your offer.
Got it. And we covered the whole offer in episode 314. So I don't want to repeat any of that stuff because it was really good. So they got to go back and listen to that. And then when it comes into making the sell, can you, for someone who's like afraid or just like the whole process, they don't have confidence around it, what would you tell them of like boost the little confidence and morale there?
Well, one of the things that works really well for me was actually a conversation that I had with you as well, was around really when you move into your offer, you'll notice in your body like an energy change, because it is slightly different from when you're teaching on the presentation to actually making an offer. But the biggest shift, or a really helpful strategy that people can use is to visualize as you're making the offer, visualize someone in front of you. Let's say you're running your webinar, you're looking at your slides. But in my mind, I am visualizing a client or someone who I know I've helped, or someone who I could help in the future. And I have a visual picture of who they are, what they look like, where they're sitting, what their problems are. And when I'm making my offer, I'm not making an offer going, oh, I really need people to buy. I make an offer thinking that is the person that I'm trying to help. That is the person that I'm committed to helping. And so I'm visualizing a person that I can genuinely serve and help. And when I do that, all of a sudden the offer energy goes from I need your money to my goal is to serve you on the highest level. And if you resonate with me and you would like to achieve the outcome that we can help you with, then the next step would be working with us in this program. And so when you come from that energetic place of wanting to serve, that sense of purpose, and doing some sort of visualization like that, even like literally in the midst of the offer, I have that visualization. That completely changes the game in terms of the energy that you're doing the offer from.
Yeah, that's huge. I feel like I could ask you a million more questions for the next 3 hours, but I know we got stuff to do. And you have a training series that's coming up. So that will be like another huge boost that we can go to. So can you tell us about the training series and what that's about?
Yeah, so we're running a training series. It's a 3-part workshop series. And if you've liked this content, we're going to be going so much deeper into it. So it's called Sell from Webinar and Live Stages. So I'm going to be going through how to design a presentation, like all the elements of a presentation that sells. We're going to be going through like a whole bunch of mindset shifts that you need to make to really feel confident selling. I'll be unpacking infusion selling, which is my trademarked idea around how you speak and sell at the same time. So that's about getting the right balance of content and selling in your presentations, and really just unpacking the whole process of how to create profitable webinars, how to go from basically making no money or $100, what that I made on a webinar, to doing hundreds of thousands of dollars on webinars, or any sort of presentation, whether it be, you could be doing a challenge, you could be doing, it could be a live presentation. It doesn't matter what it is, as long as you're speaking to an audience, to a group, this is going to be relevant for you.
Amazing. I'm so excited for that. So the link, we'll put it in the description. It's just going to be rachelandgom.com/training series. So go save your spot, because this is the stuff that can impact your business tremendously. Like when you learn this stuff, you'll go from how you wet, not selling. And just like, oh my gosh, the feeling of that to having $100,000 in an hour. So go register. Anything else? Like, where can we connect with you? All that good stuff.
Yes. So I have my podcast, which is The Expert Edge. You can just search that on any place that podcasts are held. And also I'm quite active on Instagram. So just at Colin Boyd, COLINBOYD.
Cool. Well, thank you for being here, and I can't wait for the series.
Thanks, Rachel.